Hello, welcome to the podcast. My name's James, and today we are going to talk about the element of fire. So the other day we talked about the elements kind of more broadly, but today I wanted to look specifically at what is fire, or what does it represent, what does it mean in a chart, and how can we use it to describe various things within astrology, and kind of get an idea of its importance or maybe lack thereof if we discover that. So first and foremost, a lot of stuff in astrology is archetypal, or you could say it's things are symbolic in nature. There's a lot of symbolism that goes on in astrology, and part of the reason is because when it was composed initially, right, as people started observing the movement of the planets, movement of the moon, the sun, seasons, etc., way back ancient history, that was a time when reading was not really a thing beyond a select small number of people, because of the difficulty of transcribing things. And so most people didn't pass things down through written word. It was all through oral tradition for the most part. And so you had to memorize things. You had to sit and listen to somebody and then memorize it. And that's not always easy. And so it was often, and you see this not just in astrology, but in a lot of other ancient kind of things. Even, for instance, I grew up conservative Christian, right? You look at the Bible's filled with parables and various other things that are kind of very symbolic, because it's meant to, the idea being, hey, if you understand this symbolic thing, then you understand the nature of what we're actually trying to describe. And so that got applied to astrology. For instance, the zodiac signs, right? People didn't look up in the sky and say, oh, there's a ram up in the sky. No, they looked up in the sky and said, hey, this area of space, we think it has these meanings. Let's attribute it to, say, a ram, because that confers the meaning, right? And so it's similar with the elements. The elements, at one point, though, with the kind of caveat with them is that the ancients did use them as a means to kind of describe the building blocks of nature. And they had different theories. Different cultures had different theories. I know the Chinese, I think they had 5 elements, and might have been 6. I'm pretty sure it's 5. But ancient Greeks had 4, as well as they had, they called them the humors, which kind of were almost like the descriptors of the elements in some ways. That might have been more medieval. I can't remember off the top of my head right this second. But regardless, it was symbolic, but also at times there was some kind of more genuine kind of thought that it was an actual component of things. So going back to fire then, with the idea of the element of fire, what we can do is we can look at the nature of fire itself, right? Non-astrologically, just a physical, like you go to you build a campfire, fireplace, you strike a match, whatever. Think of the nature of what is fire, right? Well, number one, it's hot, right? Very obviously, it's very hot. What kind of things can heat do? It can burn, it can cleanse, right? It can remove impurities. If you think of metals, it removes the impurities. Or cooking, right? You take meat or some other type of food, a vegetable, whatever, grains, you apply heat, fire, and what do? You get some new form of it, something that's more edible, tastes better. If you apply too much, though, it destroys it, it burns it, turns it into charcoal, into carbon. And so fire has this amazing ability to apply change effectively, right? The ability to change things, to, I don't want to say apply pressure necessarily, but apply some dynamic to things so that they become something else, for better or for worse, as well as, like I said, an ability to remove and cleanse the impurities of something, right? With meat, what are you doing when you cook it? You're cleansing it of the impurities, the parasites, the bacteria. When you burn metal or smelt metal down, what are you doing? You're removing the impurities, so you have a much more pure version of the type of metal you're trying to achieve, right? Whether it's gold, copper, iron, whatever. So that's the first thing. Second, fire is extremely visible, right? Very obviously so. Fire is very easy to see, especially at night. It's when before electricity, how did we see at night? We used fire. So fire was monumental in allowing for survival, because it not only provided warmth in colder, harsher climates, but it also allowed us to see when we otherwise wouldn't. So it's very visible, noticeable. You're not surprised by it. There's no lack of clarity over what it is. Another aspect is fire is always looking to consume something. So it's always trying to spread outwards, looking for more fuel. Why? Because if fire runs out of fuel, it fizzles out and it stops existing, right? It just dissipates. So fire constantly is on the move. It's constantly moving outwardly in other directions. It doesn't just kind of sit within itself, right? So it's growing. It's constantly trying to get to the next thing, right? So that's kind of the basics, right? We can see a fire. Oh, I would say one other thing is fire tends to rise upwards, right? Heat rises. We know that. So fire tends to kind of sit above a lot of other elements. That was at least a thing that they kind of saw in ancient astrology, as fire rises to the top, and kind of the hierarchy, so to speak. So fire is a bit more lofty. So how does that apply? Those things apply to astrology then? Well, let's start with heat, right? The heat component of it. Fire's hot, removes water, dries things out, right? And it has an ability to cleanse or to purge. If we think of the fire signs, what are one of the main components of them? They all can be a bit harsh, right? They can all kind of burn you. They can be a fun time, but they can be harsh. They can apply their heat, their energy in a way that can be damaging to other people. There's an abrasiveness to them. Even Sagittarius, which is very fun and optimistic because it's ruled by Jupiter, has a quality that's a bit more abrasive at times. Right? It's brutally honest, and can be a bit, high and mighty, maybe. Holier than thou is probably the better way to put that. But so they all have this quality to them where, on the one hand, they can really cleanse and purge a lot of the filth and the nonsense within the world because they provide a sense of clarity, right? The fire signs are all very clear. They're honest, right? Fire is obvious. You see it. And so in the same way, the fire signs are very obvious to what they are. There's no doubt, no hidden meaning behind the fire signs. Doesn't mean somebody who's got a lot of fire in their chart isn't capable of being secretive or being, private or whatever. But rather, when you meet them, the fire qualities are going to be very obvious for what they are. The fire signs are not ambiguous. They're, like I said, the water signs, very ambiguous, but the fire signs, not so much. Fire signs are very obvious. You know a fire sign when you see them, right? And they just go through the world in a way where there's no real hiding who and what they are and how they operate. That's kind of the big thing with that. Now, as for going back to that kind of clarity or clarifying or purging aspect to them, because they are so clear, because they're so concise in how they operate and how they work and do things, they have this ability to really get to the heart of things. They can really shine a light on things. And when you shine a light on something, right? If there's big confusion over an event, so and so said one thing, and then the next person said a different thing, fire sign's going to be able to shine a light on the event and kind of say, no, here's what actually happened. right? They bring truth into the equation. And when you bring truth into things, it clarifies, it purges, right? It removes the doubt and the frustration. Maybe not the frustration, but it removes the doubt and the any maliciousness, really. And so the fire signs have this ability to really cleanse things, but also really damage things if they're not careful, because they can be overly energetic, overly committed, overly abundant in their actions. The last thing is fire is always moving outward, right? Like I said, it's always looking for a new fuel source. And so this to me has two kind of broad things with that. Number one, it means the fire signs are always on the go. They're always moving. They're always kind of going out into the world, right? So fire signs are naturally going to be very outgoing. They're going to be wanting to be in the world. They're going to want to be on the move. What does that mean? It means they always want to act. So the fire signs are very much about action, about experience, about being in the world, living in the world. In a lot of my consultations, when I give kind of a brief overview of the zodiac, one of the things I always say is the fire signs tend to represent our personal energy, right? Personal energy is what propels us, what drives us through life to go out and to live. And that's the nature of fire. Fire is always looking for more fuel to continue existing. And so the fire signs have that dynamic. They're always looking for something. They're always trying to find fuel so to keep living, right? To keep existing. So they, in a lot of ways, are kind of the reason we live, because they provide that energy, that gusto, right? That keeps us moving, keeps us propelled outwards into life in an effort to keep living and to keep doing and to keep experiencing things. So the fire signs are really, really good about that aspect. They really want to get out into life. And, as I said, by their nature, they're very obvious in the way that they do it. And so there's not really much confusion over that, usually. As for the fuel source, what is it that is the fuel source, right? What do they need to keep going? Well, each of the fire signs operates a little differently. Obviously, it's dependent on their rulers. If you look at the houses relative to each one, they all kind of look to do different things in different ways. In the case of Mars, what's Mars always trying to do? Mars is trying to climb to the top of the mountain. It wants to be the best. Not Mars, but Aries. It's ruled by Mars. And it's a sign that wants to be the best. It wants people to see how great it is, what it's capable of, right? So it's always trying to climb to the top and trying to challenge itself. Leo wants to rule, wants to be in charge. It wants to be the one that everyone looks to as the hero, as the savior, as the king or queen, right? So it's always trying to acquire, you could say, land or people, followers, whatever it is. And so that's kind of the thing it's going out into life to do. In the case of Sagittarius, it's trying to find meaning, knowledge, right? So it's more of an intellectual or philosophical, maybe, kind of fuel that it needs compared to the others. Leo is probably the most social need. With Sagittarius, like I said, being more intellectual. And with Aries, it's more of a physical, right? It's looking for physical conquest or domination of things. So the fire signs, like I said, we know based on the element, or rather the physical nature of fire, that they're going to be bright, they're going to be vibrant, they're going to be obvious. And like I said, honest and obvious doesn't necessarily mean they don't have things they keep to themselves, but it means more the nature and the way in which they act is very clear-cut. There is no innate deception to them. When you meet somebody who is very, very fiery, it's very obvious that they're very, very fiery. And like I said, they want to go out into the world. And so that's kind of the nature of fire. I would say some other things I would add in is that the fire signs are very energetic. As I mentioned, it's the energy that propels us into life, to go out and to live and to experience. And so the fire signs are very experiential in nature, which means when you have, say, fire sign in the 9th house, what does it mean? It means, by and large, you're going to form your belief systems, right? The 9th house deals with our belief systems through experience, right? Through personal experience. Because that's the other thing. Fire is very personal. It's not a very collective mindset. It's personal energy. And so wherever you have these fire signs in your chart, it's going to show the area where you tend to need experience to drive things, as well as kind of you tend to be a bit more vibrant in that aspect of life. And those areas will also tend to be where you're looking for fuel, right? Where you're being driven out to kind of go live life. And so it's different for each of the signs, obviously. But that's kind of the general gist of it. So one thing then is what happens when you have either a lot of fire or no fire in a chart, right? All of the fire signs are opposite to the air signs, which means two implications of that. Number one, it means air is going to provide the counterbalance to the fire signs, but it also means the air signs tend to show what the fire signs really want, right? When we don't have something, there's kind of two ways we can go. We can really just embody the absence of it, or we can do everything we can to pretend that we have it. And so when we don't have a lot of fire in the chart, what you get is somebody who is either going to really pretend they have a lot of fire and act very, I don't want to say volatile, but very kind of energetically, and pretend to be energetic and pretend they want to do every life experience and try and get out there and do in an effort to stimulate that. Because again, it's a pretend thing. They're not comfortable with necessarily this need to be driven in life. And so they pretend to be driven. They go through the motions, but they're not really doing it from a place of true desire. But it's almost like I don't have this thing, so I have to pretend I have this thing. The other option is you just simply embody the absence of it, which means what? It means you get somebody who's not really driven, right? Not really have any strong need to get out and experience things. And that's going to be dependent on what the other elements are, right? If the other elements is, say, super heavy air and no fire, you'd get somebody who's going to just be, hey, I just want to think and I want to intellectualize, right? Practical experience, who cares? Intellect. A lot of ways it kind of mirrors academia. Not entirely, but so you have to look at what the other elemental component is if they're going to have this absent, because then you just see the other elements become very prominent, right? If they're very earthy, you just get somebody who's going to be very cold and practical, pragmatic, right? Concerned with materialism, the material world. So, but the big thing with this either lack of fire or this strong emphasis on fire is you're going to get somebody who's really, or sorry, I should say not strong emphasis, but with this lack of fire, you're going to get somebody who's either going to pretend because they don't have it, or they're going to embody it and just really, it's noticeable. They're not motivated, right? The fire signs, more than anything else, have a lot of motivation to go out and be and to exist. So people without fire tend to not have strong motivations. Unless, again, they're kind of pretending, but that's, it's kind of a facade. So what about when you have a lot of fire in the chart then? Well, it's the same thing. If you have a lot of fire, that means you also have a lack of other elements, most likely, right? Let's say you have, a big 5-planet stellium in like Leo or Aries or something, right? By that very nature, you're only going to have 1 or 2 planets in any of the other elements. So there's going to be a pretty heavy lack of everything else. So the natural thing is, all of the fire qualities are going to be very intense, and it's going to be overemphasized. energetic, over experiential, overly all these things. But there may also be a tendency to, again, that kind of, I want to pretend I have those other elements, and it may be one, it may be multiple. So there's a tendency to kind of overdo the qualities of some of the other ones, become excessive about them. But it would always be from a kind of a standpoint of having a lot of fire, which means, again, it's very experiential. It's very vibrant, very honest, and it's kind of working. And again, it can be harsh. The harshness cannot be understated with the fire signs. They can be very in your face, and it can be hard to deal with, particularly because you have the Sun and Mars ruling two of them. And the Sun and Mars can really burn and attack things in ways that are uncomfortable for people, right? I would say one last thing with the fire signs, we're all very individually focused. I think I mentioned this, but we see this in terms of the polarity with the air signs, where the air signs are very collective and social in their working. They're not individually focused at all. And so one of the main polarities with that, or kind of dynamics between that polarity, is you have this kind of battle between the individual and the collective, the individual will and the collective kind of rationality or organization. But that's a different discussion for a different day. So that's the fire signs. Each of them kind of operate in their own way. As I said, they have different rulers, they have different modalities. But they all want to have that sense of experience, that sense of vibrancy, brightness, drawing attention to themselves. And with Leo, it naturally wants attention. I think the other two tend to just generate attention, regardless of whether they want it or not. So there is a weird, interesting dynamic there. And I think they do want attention in certain ways, just not the way Leo does. Leo just wants to be seen for the sake of being seen in a lot of cases. So anyway, that's fire signs. I think next week we'll probably do the air signs on the next episode, just to kind of get that polarity, and then we'll go from there. So thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed.